Next, we have Kate Garrett from CL Medical. Welcome, Kate.
My name is Kate Garrett. I'm the co-founder and CEO of CL Medical. We are a medical device startup focused on developing novel products for mechanically ventilated patients. And I thought today that I would go through one of the clinical needs that we're focused on, our solution to that need, and then back up and tell you a little bit more about the process we took to get there. So ventilator-associated pneumonia, or VAP, is defined as a lung infection in a patient that's been mechanically ventilated for more than 48 hours. VAP is a big deal not just because of the clinical implications for the patient, but because it's considered a hospital-acquired condition, and in theory, preventable. Of all the HACs, VAP is one of the biggest. It's the #1 killer. It has a relatively high incidence in the at-risk population of long-term ventilated patients, and it's expensive. It costs about $40,000 to treat, leads to 6 extra days in the ICU, and on average in the US, we spend over $2 billion annually on VAP. Now, the incidence of VAP varies depending on your source, but the New England Journal of Medicine published a report in March of this year estimating the incidence at 50,000 cases annually in the US alone. With a 10% associated mortality, that means that 5,000 people die a year in the US from something that's preventable and hospital acquired. If you divide that one more level, that means that there's 14 people that die every day from this condition. So what causes VAP? It's multifactorial, but the primary etiology is well understood to be aspiration. And this is a picture of a patient that's intubated with an endotracheal tube, which is what oxygen is pumped through to breathe for you. And when you're intubated with this tube, it holds open a piece of cartilage at the top of your trachea, allowing fluid to get down into the trachea and build up. Over time, this saliva can leak past the basic cuff on the endotracheal tube, leading to aspiration and ultimately pneumonia. Now, VAP's a big deal, and the etiology is fairly well understood. So what are people doing today to prevent this? And the vast majority of people have focused on the endotracheal tube. They've done all kinds of things to improve the cuff to prevent leakage, either improved materials, improved shape. They've put suction lines in the endotracheal tube. They've coated the entire thing with silver to reduce the bacteria in the saliva. There's literally a stack of tubes taller than me that people have iterated to try and solve this problem. And I actually met somebody last week that is working on even one more iteration. So a lot of people have done this. There's clinical literature showing that if you use these aspiration prevention tubes, you can reduce the rate of VAP. But as we talked to clinicians across the US and even all over the world, we understood through our data that today about 75% of intubated patients still get this basic tube, despite the fact that there's data showing the better tubes reduce VAP, and everybody thinks VAP is a big deal. Now, this really baffled me as an engineer because I felt like you've got your data, you've got your solution, obviously, this problem is fixed. But it's clearly not, as the New England Journal of Medicine showed earlier this year. And as I looked into the space, I realized that the reason was because of a fundamental stakeholder dilemma, which is that today, the vast majority of tubes are placed by anesthesiologists and ER doctors outside of the ICU. Most people who are intubated are just ventilated for a couple of hours in the OR. A very small fraction of patients actually stay on the vent more than 48 hours and are at risk for VAP. So it's not that these doctors don't care about their patients, but again, such a small percentage stay on the vent long term, and for the ones that do, they go into the ICU and they don't see the VAP. So it's not a problem that they deal with, but they're making the tube purchase and placement decision. Inside the ICU, you have the critical care doctor who's caring for these long-term ventilated patients, but they receive the vast majority of their patients already intubated from outside of the ICU. And while they could swap the tube at this time, they run the risk of losing the airway. And in these heavily sedated patients, it's very dangerous. You could actually, if you lose the airway, you run the risk of losing their life. And so many doctors aren't willing to take that slight risk. And so they're stuck with a decision that was made upstream before they came into the ICU. So I want to emphasize this split of patients, because most people today have focused on the patients outside of the ICU. But our insight was that if we could focus on the patients, just the patients inside the ICU, we could differentiate ourselves from all of the endotracheal tubes and hopefully get further adoption in this space. And so what we came up with was a statement of our need, which was an aspiration barrier that could be applied post-intubation in the ICU for any high-risk patient. And what we came up with is what we call the Bronco Guard. It's a silicone, a very soft, compliant silicone balloon that's donut-shaped and can actually be advanced over the endotracheal tube to put an improved cuff post-intubation. We do a lot of work in human cadavers to perfect the design. So I'll just show you, there's nothing gory, but some basic pictures in a cadaver. First, you place our balloon around the endotracheal tube outside of the mouth. You advance it down the tube through the oral cavity and then down below the vocal cords, where it can be inflated above the existing cuff to create that more effective seal. So in terms of how effective is this seal, we've done a lot of bench testing to compare our balloon to some of the existing tubes and have had very positive results. This is a video showing us versus kind of the gold standard tube today. So we're pretty excited about our aspiration prevention. We're like 99.999 something % better, and we're still in the process of developing this product and bringing it to market. So this concept actually came out of my time at the Stanford Biodesign Fellowship, which is a one-year program that brings engineers, business people, and doctors together to learn how to both identify large unmet clinical needs and then come up with solutions that have commercial viability. So the 3 stages, you've got the need identification, concept creation, and then implementation. And you can see from kind of the scale of these boxes, the vast majority of the work is really done up front in characterizing and understanding the need, a little bit, of course, in the invention and concept generation, and then the vast majority of it in actually developing the company and bringing the product to market. So the biodesign program actually has a textbook that's very great, and you can buy and read all about their process. It makes coming up with medical technologies seem very simple, especially to engineers. You just have to go from step 1.1 down to 6.4, and you will be successful and have a product that you can sell. Now, it's obviously not quite that simple or that sequential. You spend a lot of time circling back and sometimes just going all the way back to start, but the book is great and kind of lays this out very well, much better than I can do in 3 minutes. But I thought I would give you just a high-level overview of a couple of these areas and what we did. So the first step is need finding. And notice that the first step is not, find a cool technology or come up with a cool technology and then find an application for it. It's really start with the need, and not just start with the need, but truly understand the need. In our space, a lot of people looked at Vapp and said the need is an improved endotracheal tube. But when we looked at it, the need is not an improved endotracheal tube, it's aspiration prevention. And if you look at it from that approach, you may come up with a very different solution from an improved endotracheal tube. So what we did in the fellowship is our teams of 4 got open passes to go into the hospital and observe clinicians, observe procedures, talk to patients, and we came up with a list of over 300 problems that we observed. The other team during our year actually came up with 700, and I wasn't sure if I should be proud of them or just horrified that they found that many problems in our healthcare system within 2 weeks. But so once you've got your need, your problems identified, you have to filter them. You can't develop 300 companies simultaneously. So that's the next step, is to screen through those needs. And we did this with an Excel sheet, and as all good engineers will, we tried to quantify everything. And so for each need that we had, we ranked it based on several criteria. A lot of people use different ones, but for us, We focused on severity of the problem, number of patients that are affected by it, size of the market opportunity, the clinical trial requirements, the regulatory requirements. And so we did all these great numbers and came up with multiplication factors and then a total sum at the end that helped us kind of rank the significance of these problems. This is our top 13 needs that we came up with from the 300. So from there, we went into the concept generation. And what this meant was basically spending hours in the brainstorming room at Stanford Biodesign, which is a windowless room full of whiteboards all around you. It's supposed to be inspiring. I found it kind of stifling, but whatever, it's the brainstorming room. And so you come up with all kinds of crazy ideas, but you basically ideate for hours. And then at that point, much like with the need filtering, you have to filter out these hundreds of concepts that you might have. There are a lot of different ways to do this, but some of the high-level ones are focusing on what else is already out there. If somebody has already invented and patented your idea, it's going to be very hard to bring this to market and make any money off of it. You have to think about what the regulatory hurdles would be for the technology, if there's reimbursement or the cost to develop the product. And then you have to think about feasibility. Tobin asked me to show one or two kind of failed design iterations that we went through, and I wish I could show you that we only had one or two, but we actually have hundreds of designs that we went through to try and get to the final concept. And then the last phase that I'm not going to go into is the business plan and fundraising and that whole process of actually starting the company. This takes a lot of work, as shown early on that first slide, and it's very challenging. You'll spend many hours with your co-founders. This is a picture of my co-founder Dan at 11 o'clock at night as he's trying to get his newborn to go to sleep, and we're strategizing about our business plan simultaneously. So what I would say is just as you go through this, plan to spend many hours with these people, and so make sure you like spending a lot of time with them. Thank you.
Thank you, Kate.